In November last year, after a highly publicised legal battle, Britney Spears was freed from a brutal 13-year-long conservatorship that put her father in charge of her finances, her healthcare and her personal decisions, effectively her entire life. Well, since then, she celebrated her freedom by posting pictures to her 41 million followers on Instagram. Naked pictures. Well, last week alone, she's posted a series of them. Concerned fans have flocked to social media, as they always love to do. Is Britney okay? Is she having another mental breakdown? Well, I don't think she is. I wrote a column for The Sun this week saying, actually, I think she's expressing the freedom she didn't have for all those years of that conservatorship, which became incredibly draconian. But to discuss all this, I'm joined by music management legend Louis Walsh, his words, not mine, who actually walked with Britney as a judge on X Factor USA in 2012, and Fox Nation host Tommy Lahren, who's an unashamed Britney fan. Well, let's start with you, Tommy. You know, I looked at these pictures. I've got to say, my first reaction was to be a bit concerned. It's like, what's she doing? Because she's got a history of erratic behaviour. But actually, when I read the captions and I saw what she was sort of saying about it, I genuinely felt this is a woman who feels liberated. And she always talked about the time of the conservatorship as being like being in prison. What do you think?
I'm free Britney all the way. She's living her life. She's loving her life. And you know what, Piers? What celebrity doesn't post nude photos or suggestive photos? I mean, scroll through and pick a name, any name. Pick a Kardashian, any Kardashian.
I don't.
They're all posting this kind of stuff. Is it a little bizarre? Sure, it's a little bizarre, but with all the craziness that goes on in Hollywood and in the media with public figures, let Britney be Britney. She's not hurting anybody. She's enjoying her freedom, and let her freak flag fly if she so chooses. It's all up to her. Thank goodness she is finally free.
Yeah, I kind of feel that. Louis, you've got a history with Britney because you did judge X Factor USA with her, and it was a bit of a nightmare, wasn't it? She did one show, I think, and over 2 days was sort of completely out of it, a bit of a diva about everything, and you were worried and maybe
she wasn't in...
Yeah. Tell me about it.
She wasn't in a good place. She wasn't in a good place. But, you know, I'm a fan as well, Piers, and she's a complete survivor. She's 40 years old. She can do whatever she wants. Madonna's taking all her clothes off all the time. Why can't Britney do it, you know? And I just think she's enjoying her life, you know, and she's free. But I'd like her to make a record. I'd like her to have a hit song, get back in studio with Mix Martin or somebody.
Yeah, because I remember watching her perform on the X Factor UK 2 or 3 years before you judged it. I think 2008, 9, something like that. And it was a really shocking performance. And she was only about 27. I thought, this is the beginning of the end. You know, it's really all over for her.
Yeah, I remember.
But when I look at her now...
We tried to...
Yeah, when I look at it now, though, Louis, I think, you know, one great song, and it could be one of the all-time great comebacks, right?
Totally. Max Martin, Britney, you get a hit. Absolutely. And she is a great pop star. She's a household name. She's got really loyal fans, you know, and she can do what she wants. So who's taking the pictures, by the way? It's not her. So it must be her guy.
Well, I mean, she's been with this guy, Tommy, for 5 years. She's pregnant, expecting another baby. Let me just ask you, though, Tommy, even as a sort of super fan, does any part of any of this worry you a little bit in the sense that when someone does get liberated after so long under someone's control, like her father, you know, it can go wrong? Are you worried it might, or do you trust the process here?
I think that, you know, obviously the posts are a little weird. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a Britney fan. I look at them and, you know, I cringe from time to time. But like I said, what celebrity isn't posting weird stuff? What celebrity isn't erratic? We've got so many other celebrities and pop stars and figures changing their gender from one day to the next. Let Britney do what she wants to do. She was miserable under that conservatorship. She said she was miserable. She was acute enough to understand she was miserable in that conservatorship. So you know what? If she's happy now, that's all that matters. Of course, we hope that the family and friends that she's still close to, we hope that they're watching over her, and we want the best for Britney, but I think she's going to make a huge comeback. I think she's going to be stronger than ever, and she's going to do it on her terms.
I just realised you actually look a bit like Britney.
Yeah.
Hey, I take that as a major compliment.
I intended it as a compliment. Louis, I've got to ask you before I let you go. Simon Cowell is on the verge of a truly historic moment where it looks like he may actually get married. Do you believe it's going to happen? What's your thought about this?
I don't know. Piers, you know him as much as I do, you know? He loves himself more than anybody else, you know? So Lauren is hanging in there a long time. Maybe he should get married. I don't know. He told me he never would. So I don't know. He's engaged. Lauren deserves it. She's hung around a long time. She deserves it.
She's a lovely lady, actually, Lauren. She's a lovely lady. I've got a feeling he is actually going to finally crumble.
Do you think so?
I think so, yeah.
Do you think he'll get married? Are you going to go?
I don't know. I mean, he's so tight, isn't he? Would you invite anyone to come and drink at his expense? We'd have to see.
We'll have to go. We'll have to go, even if we're not invited.
We should actually be best men, me and you. After all we've done for him for the last 30 years, we should, or we could be wedding crashers.
You know?
We could be wedding crashers if he's too mean to invite us. Tommy, I want to take you back before we let you go, Tommy. You talked about every celebrity has naked pictures on social media. I don't know if you were familiar with my own work in this genre. So here's my famous Burger King commercial. Which was me in a Burt Reynolds loincloth by a roaring hearth fire. And if you believe that's my real body, you're living in cloud cuckoo land. But anyway, you're right, Tommy, we've all done it. Got to leave it there. Great debate. I'm glad to see Britney back. I think she's one of the all-time great pop stars. Take care, both of you, Tommy and Louis. Appreciate it. Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. When Dustin Hoffman stayed up for 3 days straight to appear tired for his role in Marathon Man, the great Laurence Olivier famously retorted, "My dear boy, have you tried acting?" I mean, that is the job of an actor, right? But some think that gay roles, for example, should only be played by gay actors, and disabled roles by disabled actors, trans roles by trans actors, and presumably, by that logic, Nazi roles by Nazi actors. Or is that ridiculous? Is all of it ridiculous? It's a peculiar kind of method acting zealotry, and it's happening more and more often. It would consider, for example, this sort of scene offensive.
You know what a woman said to me in the casino today? She asked me if I was Liberace's son.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Come here.
No.
Come here.
No.
No,
girl, you don't get anything.
Oh, yes,
you get nothing like it.
That was Matt Damon and Michael Douglas, both obviously in Liberace, both acting. Now, my next guest is a gay man who says his career suffered because Hollywood, that great liberal bastion of tolerance and fairness, couldn't grasp or tolerate or be fair about his ability to play it straight. He's, of course, director-producer. Movie superstar Rupert Everett. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you.
When you watch, as a gay man, you watch that scene from Candelabra, the Liberace film. To me, as a straight guy, it seemed very sensitively done, very realistic. You?
Yeah, and more than that, for me, watching that film, I was very moved by the amount of work and detail that those two actors bothered to put into their research, the way they attacked the roles. I was elated by it. And there's many examples of fantastic straight actors playing great gay roles, and then there's some less good. And I think the question is more, why can't gay actors play straight roles?
Right.
That's the thing that
Because
interests
what happened
me.
to you was fascinating, because when you were deemed to be straight, you got all these romantic leads in Hollywood, everyone loved you, and you were the Hugh Grant of your... If you don't mind the comparison, I would find that pretty repellent. But anyway, no, I've said it, it's out there. You were the Hugh Grant of your day, and then you came out, and suddenly it was like, what, no more work for you, son. We can't have you as a straight romantic lead.
I don't think it was actually quite like that, to be honest. But the thing that was very frustrating when I had my kind of big Hollywood moment, which was playing a gay best friend and being gay, it was at that point very difficult to graduate. I knew I had to try and graduate to playing something else apart from just that role. And it felt that it was more or less impossible. So my question is, I don't think gay actors should just play the gay roles. But the gay actors should be able to play the straight roles too. I think some straight guys play great gay roles.
And it's not just about the gay roles and gay actors and so on. I want to show some pictures here from other movies. Tom Hanks, for example, in Philadelphia, actually is an example of that. But Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, to me, it was an incredibly powerful movie, which shone an unbelievably bright light on the issue of AIDS. And what Tom Hanks did, I thought, he played the role magnificently. But more importantly, he brought tremendous numbers of eyeballs to watch it because he's Tom Hanks.
And it was a riskier period to do that as well. I mean, when Michael Douglas and Matt Damon did the Candelabra movie, things had changed substantially.
Yes.
when he did that film, it wasn't really a subject that people
But
talked about.
would a gay man have played that any more powerfully? And was there a gay actor out at the time, for example, who would have got the box office success that Tom Hanks brought?
Well,
and therefore, the light that was shone on the issue.
This is the other question. You know, people forget that Hollywood is a business. So, for example, when Scarlett Johansson was stopped from playing a trans role, there simply wasn't a trans actress at that point big enough to sustain a $50-60 million movie. I found that was a mistake of the trans community because there were probably lots of other trans roles in the film that would have been played by trans actresses, and Scarlett Johansson wasn't going to be doing some portrait that was anti-trans. So I felt it was slightly blinkered attitude.
Eddie Redmayne had a similar thing with the Danish Girl. You know, he got into trouble for that from the trans community.
But the question there is, he started the role as a boy, so who's going to play the boy part? Right. The problem with that movie, in the end, is it was just dull.
Right, which is another crime altogether. But Eddie Redmayne also played Stephen Hawking, for example, and that was an amazingly powerful,
fantastic performance.
Role. And again, shone a huge light on that particular affliction which Stephen Hawking had. And I felt did it brilliantly. Now, I don't know why it would need to be somebody who's got that condition that Stephen Hawking had, motor neuron disease or a variant of it, to be as effective or more effective than Eddie Redmayne could be.
Well, I don't think it could have been, because someone with that condition just wouldn't be able to to be out there on the set from 6 in the morning till 8 at night. I just played a role of someone who'd had a very bad stroke. It would be impossible for someone who'd had a very bad stroke to really start working.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Once you take the logic...
If they wanted to.
Right, but if you take the logic to its logical end...
Well, you have to be a murderer to play a murderer.
Well, this is my point. So here we got Anthony Hopkins, who played Hitler. Right? I mean, are we legitimately saying that if you're going to play Hitler now in a movie, you have to be a Nazi? Similarly, The Sopranos. The Sopranos, you know, are we going to say now that they all had to be the senior Sopranos, genuine members of the mob?
Right, but on the other side, Piers, you've got to remember, yes, of course, we shouldn't be making rules about this. Yes, of course it's great for gay actors who've had quite a hard time, you know, historically, to be playing more roles, to be getting the gay... It's quite frustrating. I was frustrated. I remember going to see Colin Firth in the film by Tom Ford, and he invited me to a screening. I thought, well, thanks, Colin, that's the end of my career. Because, you know, that role really should have been mine. And then, so, you know, there's a frustration about that, of course.
And there's also a point I do get, which is what some disabled actors have made the point to me, that there's not the opportunity at the grassroots level, you know, for them to get on the right ladder to get them into a position where they may get these big roles because they're not perceived to be big enough box office stars. They find that the system is a bit oppressive to people. And I get that. I get the fact that maybe disabled actors do not get the same opportunities.
I get that too. But, I mean, the thing is, how is the business meant to change for that? I mean, it's quite complicated. No, you know, it's really frustrating if you're a disabled actor. And but I don't think the answer to Richard III in Stratford-on-Avon, for example, which Greg, the outgoing head of the RSC, said that it can only now be played by a disabled actor.
I just thought it was ridiculous to say that.
I think it would be I'd love to see it played by a disabled actor, by the way, but I don't see why it's one of the great roles that actors want to play. You know, acting is acting. Movies and television and cinema are a particular arm.
Isn't that the thing? That ultimately, acting should mean what it says on the tin.
It's acting.
That you, as an actor, one of the best in the business, you should be able to play any role, actually, right? Because, I mean, I look at things like the period drama Bridgerton, for example. When you look at Bridgerton now, it's actually a fantasy, in a way, in the sense that it has many black actors playing people that we know at the time were almost uniquely white feudal people, right? Lords and so on. I don't mind that at all. In the same way, I wouldn't mind if Idris Elba was the next James Bond. I would mind if they suddenly made James Bond a woman. In other words, there's going to be a kind of common sense valve here.
You wouldn't mind, or you would mind?
I would mind if it was a woman. It's like women should get their own spies, right? So you can't turn James Bond And I don't want him going non-binary or any other things. None of that. None of that. But I don't mind if it's a black actor playing Bond at all. I would think that's fine. Same way Bridgerton.
And same way Doctor Who is now a black gay actor.
Right.
And I think that's very exciting.
Yeah.
I think that will give Doctor Who a whole new impetus. Which
But that's
is exciting.
but that's a different thing. I don't think anyone really, as long as you're not a bigot, would have a problem with any of that. Let me just, while I've got you, I'm curious about your view. We've been talking a lot on the show about cancel culture, this sort of rather insidious phenomenon which has raised its ugly head. You've always been very outspoken. You've always been pretty uncensored in all the time I've known you. What do you feel about the society that we now operate in, these eggshells everyone feels they have to tread on?
I think it feels like the Stasi, to be honest. I think it feels incredibly repressive. I don't think it manages to achieve the aims that it's after. For example, I don't know. I've never met J.K. Rowling, for example, and I've never read her books. And I'm willing to bet that before this all happened, she was not someone who was anti-transsexual.
No.
Not remotely.
She's never said
Everything you
anything
know about
anti-trans
her,
at all.
nothing. So, but now she might be. She might easily be now.
Well, funny enough, I interviewed. There was a big scene outside the Emmeline Pankhurst statue in Manchester, where you had women's rights campaigners. We're going to have a little rally there, and you had these trans activists turn up. And I interviewed one of the trans activists who just was incredibly abusive on the show live, calling me all sorts of names and stuff. And I don't have a transphobic bone in my body. I want trans people to have equality and fairness, but I also want to safeguard women's rights. I don't think the two are incompatible.
No, but I think at a certain point now, it's reached a point where someone's got to start trying to make peace between these two groups. And I think the thing we tend to forget is that in the kind of 24-hour history of humanity, these 2 million years, the women's movement only started literally 3 seconds ago in that whole thing.
Yes.
So our brains are hardwired to something very anti-women too, in a way. So the trans movement has come right on the edge of the women's movement. In fact, they're probably, when you look at it from further in advance, the same thing.
We do. You're right, though. We need to bring the extremities of these debates
because
to a
I
more
don't believe
centrist
people
position.
are trans. These people, I think it's dangerous to call people TERFs when they're not, because you make them into it.
J.K. Rowling, to me, is not transphobic. She wants to safeguard women's rights, and she should be applauded for doing so. Rupert, we've run out of time. Great to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
You're looking in tremendous shape, I might add.
So are you.
Really good to see you. Thank you. Thank you for coming
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. I want to play Rupert Everett in a movie. Actually, I want you to play me in a movie. I mean, that would be good, actually.
I could.
You'd be good as me if you just, I don't know.
Lost some weight.
Great to see you.
Take care.
Oh, he's off. He's storming off.
Oh, am I meant to?
No, not yet. It's fine. I don't
sorry.
know. If you want to, it's the done thing. You can sit there for a bit if you like. It wasn't exactly the... But first, a new bombshell poll published today shows that nearly half of the King's realms would vote to become republics if they had the chance. Caribbean countries cite colonial ties as the reason for wanting to part with the monarchy. And pretty disturbingly for King Charles, 10 of the 14 countries polled say they back the Sussexes, saying Meghan's treatment exposes racist views. It's ignited debate about whether King Charles should apologise for Britain's past sins, maybe even pay reparations. Would that make any difference? Or would it just fuel the fire of republicanism? Well, here with me now to debate this, the former royal butler to Princess Diana, Paul Burrell, the activist and organiser of Black Lives Matter protests, Iman Ayton, and the historian and royal author, Dr. Tessa Dunlop. Well, this will be a quiet debate, won't it? Well, you brought your earplugs, Paul.
I won't get a look in.
Paul, let me start with you. I've got a problem with this constant looking back in history, feeling guilty for stuff that none of us in this era actually did, and then having to say sorry for everything that we didn't do, and even now, apparently having to pay people today for stuff that happened to their ancestors many generations before. I don't really get what that achieves.
We should learn from lessons of the past. We can't change anything, and we should move forward. But the Queen's greatest achievement, his mother's greatest achievement, was the Commonwealth of Countries. She was very proud of that. I think if you could beam her down now, she would say, my Commonwealth. That should survive intact into the King's reign. So he should do whatever he can. Now, bear in mind, I've known this man for a very long time.
Yeah.
He has a voice. and he will say what he
But
feels.
here's the real problem he's got. There's another voice yapping away about racism. Two voices. His son, Harry, and Harry's wife, Meghan, who for 3 years have branded the royal family a bunch of callous racists. That is now turning up in these polls because, understandably, frankly, black people in the Commonwealth around the world are going, whoa, really? They're racist, these people? And yet they haven't produced a shred of evidence for any of it.
You and I know the royal family are not racist. And you and I know that they pressed the racist button on the Oprah Winfrey show.
Yeah.
And they never apologised to the Queen.
Never.
She went to her grave thinking there was a racist in the royal family.
And after she died, they said...
What happened?
We never
didn't say that, the press said that.
Didn't mean to say it was racism.
Why didn't you correct it, Harry? Why didn't you tell your...
Well, we know why, because it made them... They weaponise racism and mental health to make themselves extremely rich.
I totally...
All right, come on. This is my problem. This has always been my problem with this racism narrative that these two have spun without any evidence, is that people around the world, particularly people of colour, they believe it. And why wouldn't they believe it? They're hearing the first person who wasn't a white royal bride say they're racist, these people. So then the damage is palpable, it's tangible, and it will lead, I think, if we're not careful, to a load of these countries becoming republics and the beginning of the end of the monarchy.
Thank you for your soliloquy.
No, thank you.
All right, no problem. So first and foremost, my feelings on the royal family and racism are not predicated on Harry and Meghan's willingness to identify it. That's the difference between me and you. We are talking about a country that was built off of racism, and we are referring to the oldest institution in this country that started it all. So that's the first thing. In terms of why black people and many others feel the way that we do, well, the monarchy is a symbol of white supremacy. OK? White supremacy. That is the reason. Let me just
Why
finish.
does it make any difference if King Charles says sorry? Or why does it make if he pays money? What difference does that make?
OK. So reparations...
How does that combat racism?
No, it actually does. So let me
The guy hasn't got a racist bone in his body. He's done more for racism than any public figure in the country. Why should he be paying for the sins of people hundreds of years ago?
OK, so can I finish?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, the monarchy is a symbol of white supremacy, which is what black people have had to contend with for the last 400 years, notwithstanding the fact that Elizabeth, or every king and queen, from Elizabeth I...
You think the last late queen was a model of white supremacy?
Let me finish my point. You just asked me several questions. Let me finish my point.
Well, answer the question,
Right,
then.
I'm getting there, so just finish.
Well, hurry
Let me
up.
just finish, OK?
Hurry up.
So, every king and queen, from Elizabeth I to William IV, has supported and profited off of slavery. So, this is about the fact that this country was built off of racism, and that's the
country
point.
also
Wait, hold on a
led...
second. This country...
You can't just keep
stems
talking.
No, because I haven't even finished my point.
You
Piers.
can't just
keep
make
interrupting.
outlandish statements about our royal family and not expect me to jump in.
Piers, you keep interrupting. Can I finish my point?
This country also led the world out of slavery.
OK, so can I finish my point?
A long time ago.
Can I finish my point, please?
Yes.
Perfect.
So please finish it.
I will. No problem. Just be patient. So, every single king and queen from Elizabeth I to William IV over a 270-year period supported the enslavement of Africans and profited as a result. So it doesn't... It doesn't take any genius. Hold on a second. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that this country was built off of racism and it stems from white supremacy, all of which is directly attributed to the crown, slavery, and colonialism. To answer your point, let me finish my point.
Keep talking.
Piers, you keep interrupting.
Answer my question.
Let's have a conversation.
Answer my question.
Let's have a conversation.
We need mediation here, guys.
You spoke about slavery. Let me answer the point.
I asked you a specific question. Why should King Charles be either apologising for what happened centuries ago or paying money for it?
OK, so what you're talking about is slavery. I'm not talking about slavery. Slavery can be traced back to Europe. The Greek slave trade, to be specific, in 400 BC, then the Roman Empire, and then we get to the Muslim conquest of 7th century.
And black people had slaves
So, what we're talking about,
right?
exactly. So I'm not talking about
slavery comes in many forms.
I am not talking about
there is
slavery.
a lot of slavery around today.
So I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about colonialism, neo-colonialism, racism, racial disparities, and the racist system of oppression and exploitation of black people and white supremacist activities, which have been rebanded under the guise.
What's that got to do with King Charles?
I am telling you why he needs to apologise and pay reparations.
Why? What did he do?
Anything to do with slavery.
What did he do?
I'm telling you, colonialism, neo-colonialism,
he didn't do that.
Racial disparities and a racist system and white supremacist attitudes. That is the legacies of the crown, slavery and colonialism that still remains.
I understand.
Let me finally get my point across. Lord,
you've got your point across, but here's my point, my counterpoint to you. What's any of that got to do with King Charles, who actually has been, I think, one of the great standard bearers in royal history for actually promoting racial equality and tackling racial injustice.
So let me explain.
Yet you want him to be issuing grovelling apologies for people hundreds of years ago, and you want him to pay money.
Okay, so I think black people would be far more inclined to get over it if it wasn't for the fact that the legacies of the crown, slavery and colonialism still remain, which includes racism, racial disparities and the racist global system of oppression and exploitation of black people. Which
all right, you're not answering my question.
I am, but you don't want to accept it. That's the difference.
No,
that's the difference.
You haven't explained
you also have the wealth of economic expansion as a result of exploitation of black people. And you also have global... Hold on. You haven't even let me finish, Piers. No problem, no problem.
You've done 9/10 of the talking.
No, you didn't let me
Tessa,
finish. You didn't let me finish.
You've heard the debate.
I think you're both wrong, actually. On the one hand, we celebrate, and you certainly do, Piers, the idea of monarchy as continuity.
Yeah.
Going way back when. I mean, I read an article this week that traced the anointing oils to the Old Testament and King Solomon. You can't pick and choose which bits of that continuous historic line you like.
Yes, I can.
Well, how is that I'm wrong?
You can, but it's hugely, problematic.
And
I would counter to you where we have the face of history and the physical form of history in our royal family. When, for example, France, the Republic, outlawed slavery much later, and in the civil wars in America, that's what it took in America much later. So my point is, no, 2 seconds. Let me finish my point.
You see, you want to interrupt, but you interrupted me several times.
You did all the talking.
I see your hypocrisy right now. It's fine. I did all the talking.
I think what you interrupting me. What we're doing here is we're conflating an individual family with institutions of state. You can't expect a king to apologise. He doesn't have that power. He would have to be told to apologise by the government because it's an institution of state.
Do I have to? All right.
He's talked about sorry.
Excuse me. Time out. Time out.
Actively apologised.
Time out.
Time out. You keep talking about slavery. Let's just be clear about slavery. Yes, you did end slavery. You've made that point and you've made that point, so let me address it. You did end slavery, and there was a clause in the contract that said, for example, that Jamaicans had to work up to 45 hours a week for the following 4 years, whilst you simultaneously paid off the slave owners and left the enslaved in their countries to rot. And then you transition to colonialism, where slavery still continued, and then you transition to the Commonwealth, where you continue to assert your dominance, exploit black people, and do it in a far more dignified way while simultaneously...
There are also... Excuse me.
Nobody's refuting...
Can we all stop talking?
Nobody's refuting the repugnance of that.
Can we please time out? The biggest problem with slavery right now is there are between 7 to 10 million slaves in India. Last time I looked, that is not as a result of white supremacy causing modern-day slavery. I would rather we expend all our energy on current slavery issues than going back in the past, as we now do with... We now go back in the past for everything, wallowing in self-guilt about stuff that had nothing to do with us. Paul.
Yes. Legacies. You ignored that conveniently. Legacies of the crown, slavery and colonialism. You ignored that conveniently.
This is such a negative...
Legacies going back how far? How far do you want to go back?
400 years black people have been constant.
OK, so I want...
I told you that.
So do you think the Vikings should be paying me money for what they did to me?
See, you're talking about slavery. I am not. I already explained that.
I'm not talking about slavery.
I'm talking about colonialism,
You're not listening to me,
racism and racial disparities that still contend...
Stop shouting. You're not listening to what I said.
You're not listening to me.
Should the Vikings and the Romans also, through their modern-day ancestors, be paying me reparations for what they did to my family?
So I'm not talking about slavery, I'm talking about colonialism.
It's not slavery, you're not listening to me.
Yes, I am.
The Vikings and Romans didn't make us slaves.
No, yes, you're talking about the Roman Empire, which included
slavery. I'm talking about the Romans and the Vikings coming over here and causing immeasurable harm to my ancestors.
Empire and slavery.
Should Italians and Norwegians be paying me reparations?
In one sentence, Iman, in one sentence.
Go ahead.
What do you want? In one sentence, what's your idea?
Thank you, Tessa.
You want money?
You want money?
You want money.
Reparations.
Then I want money from the Vikings and the Romans. Paul,
I think...
Paul, be very patient.
No, but the Commonwealth is a force for good.
Yes.
Commonwealth countries. Yes, it is. They do.
Absolutely.
They work for each other. It's a family, a community of families that help each other. That's why it was formed. And
no, you benefit more. That's why it's formed.
No, we don't benefit more. They benefit as well. They do benefit. Of course they do.
Paul.
Yes, they do.
Yes, I'm not saying that they don't. What I'm saying is that we benefit, you benefit, you benefit
Everyone
more.
benefits.
Exactly.
All right.
You benefit, you benefit, you benefit more. That's white supremacy.
How much money do you want from me?
That's what I keep talking about. Okay,
How much money do you want from me?
The National Commission on Reparations said that Jamaica, for example, is
how much do you want from me?
1.2 trillion.
How much do you want from me?
It's not about my feelings and not from you. This isn't about me and
We've all got to chip in, right? So
but
how much do you want? How much money could I give you for
That's
something that had nothing to do with me, right?
That's why I want it.
How much money could I give you to make racism better? Nothing
Keep ignoring
is
that
the answer.
conveniently. We're talking about the legacies of the Crown-saving colonialism, which includes racism.
All right. I don't know why you've come on deciding to speak like a robot today, but it's not really working.
Because you don't listen. That's why.
But nor does talking to me like that. Doesn't work.
Okay, well,
right?
how about listening?
But I will happily
how about
pay.
Listening?
If you could convince me that it will change racism one iota in this country, I will pay you a cheque for the damage inevitably that was done by my relatives when they weren't being attacked by Vikings and Romans. I will pay you reparations if I think you have any argument for why I should. And you know what? There isn't one.
Can I give you a response?
No, we've run out of time. That's it.
That's the point.
Guys, thank you all very much indeed. Well, joining me now is broadcaster Sir Trevor Phillips, who's re-released and updated his book, Windrush, 75 Years of Modern Britain. Also in the studio, Talk TV's Paula Roan, Adrian and Richard Tice. Right, there's a lot to unpack here, Sir Trevor. You are probably the most qualified man in the country to unpack it with me. So let me just start with that simple question. Is Britain a racist country?
Well, as much as it pains me to agree with you about anything, Piers, I think actually I reach the same conclusion as you do. When you ask the question, is Britain a racist country, the first thing is to ask, compared to what? Compared to the days when my parents came here with their then 9 children, I was the 10th born here, and when my father said that he would have to walk the streets at night looking for somewhere to sleep, or when we lived in 2 rooms. No chance of black people getting council houses then, because council tenants wouldn't have us on the estates, so we lived in Rackman slums. In our family's case, 2 rooms, black family upstairs, black family downstairs. That's why I was sent back to the Caribbean, because you can't get 12 people into 2 rooms very conveniently. Or compared to when I had my first girlfriend at university, and in order to meet her mother, we had to meet in Selfridges, because her mother couldn't tell her father that his daughter was dating somebody black. So I think when people say, it's terrible racist, just talk to your parents or to talk to your grandparents. Now, that doesn't mean we're perfect, but if you survey people now, and the think tank British Future did this a couple of weeks ago, 80% of people from ethnic minorities will tell you that compared to anywhere on the continent, and by the way, compared to the United States, this is a better place to live if you are not white than anywhere else in the developed world.
I walk up and down my local high street maybe a couple of times a day. It just seems unbelievably multicultural, London. I mean, I don't venture north a lot. When I do, it doesn't feel a lot different, actually, when I go to Manchester or places like that. It just feels like we live in an incredibly tolerant, multicultural environment now. I think there are racists in Britain, no question, as there are in every country. But my God, we've come a long way, I think, from that environment your parents had to come to.
Yeah, I mean, let's steady on a bit. I mean, the fact that there are many racists in this country, that doesn't make us a racist nation. But that doesn't mean that we don't have problems. We don't have a situation where people who look like me know that when they go for a job, people will smile at them and be very lovely to them. And as soon as they walk out the door, say, oh, not going to have that one, because they won't fit.
Let me give you an example.
There are all sorts of reasons.
Let me give you an example. I remember watching players like Luther Blissett, one of the first black footballers, then John Barnes and others. I remember the monkey chants from the terraces. I remember the bananas being thrown on, not how they remember it, they were on the receiving end. But I remember watching it. And you would never see that in an English professional game now. I mean, this is unheard of. You hear about it in Spain still, and countries like that, but not here. And I was really struck by, for example, the taking the knee, the George Floyd thing. It was divisive and controversial for many people. But I got to say, at Arsenal, for example, very multicultural crowd, a lot of black players, Bukayo Saka and others. It was always, they did it for the whole time that it went on for that whole season. It was immaculately heard by the home and away crowds. I never heard a single boo. Now, I don't think that would have happened even 20 years ago.
I think that is true. And, you know, and Arsenal is a sort of very polite, nice club. I mean, not a winning club, but a very nice club. If you went to Chelsea, which is has been my club for more than half a century, when I was a student, I stopped going
because of the racism.
Yeah, because they were throwing darts, and I was like the bullseye in the dartboard.
Right.
So I stopped going for a long time. But today, you wouldn't get any of that in Chelsea. In fact,
well, you've had the occasional, but when it happens, it becomes a big story.
Exactly. It's nothing like the old days when we had, you know, the headhunters and all that business. Today, our heroes are Didier Drogba, Kante. I mean, this is the country itself has changed. And by the way, those people that you saw coming down the gangplank from Windrush, they were the people who changed things. Okay,
so let's move to something like, and I totally agree with you, by the way. Let's move to cricket. Right? Now, you have a vested interest, I think, in the recruitment process for the chair of this inquiry, which has come out with a pretty damning 317-page report holding up a mirror to cricket, which has concluded there's structural and institutional racism existing within the game. Women are treated as subordinate to men at all levels of the sport. There's elitism and class-based discrimination in cricket. Now, and says black cricket has been failed and ECB must develop a plan to revive it. I don't think people in the game would disagree with that assessment. Some are horrified. I mean, quite surprised and shocked. On some of it, and I'll come to the racial part in a moment with you, but on the part, for example, about elitism, I remember when I was 12, I got picked for the England prep school's cricket squad. I was a fast bowler, loved Dennis Lilly, and I was very good for my age, but I was playing cricket 3 hours a day. I was being trained at my prep school by a former Hampshire cricketer, and I had the benefit of that privilege and elitist experience, if you like. And then I went to local comprehensive where they literally played cricket once a week for 2 hours if they could find any of the meagre equipment that they had for all the children. And if a teacher could be bothered to do it, which often wasn't the case. So I went from playing 3 hours a day to nothing. And it seems to me we could be the world beaters all the time at cricket in this country if state schools had anything like the commitment, which would have to come, I guess, from government funding, to things like cricket, which they just don't. I mean, they don't. So the chances of breaking through past the more privileged, elitist private school system as a cricketer, they're pretty low.
Yeah, and I think the basic point here is, I mean, I was born here, but I grew up in the Caribbean, where cricket is, you know, there's the air and there's water and then there's cricket.
Yeah.
And they all flow through the village. We play cricket in the streets here. They play, they'll have nets. At the moment, we don't have any of that in this country. And it's not a surprise then that people will, if they're any good, if they're athletic, they'll do basketball, girls will play netball, the boys will play football. I think that this is a terrible thing, to be honest, because I think cricket is a fantastic sport for teaching you disciplines, for teaching you teamwork and so on. And if I may say so, Cindy Butts, who chaired this inquiry, I was delighted that she took on the role because we were asked to find somebody to do it. And she's done a fantastic job. The thing about what she has said, people need to remember, cricket is more than a game. And, OK, it's, I'm a West Indian.
It's a religion.
It's a religion. Cricket is more than a game, but it also tells you something about the society. The greatest book about sport ever written, Beyond the Boundary, by Trinidadian intellectual C.L.R. James, essentially showed that what happens in the world is paralleled on the field. So, for example, 60 years ago in this country, we used to have a thing called gentlemen versus players before you were born.
Professionals v amateurs,
Yeah, exactly. The gentlemen
had their own gates.
Yeah, exactly. The gentlemen were posh guys who only played for expenses, went through that one gate to the pavilion. The players were professionals. They went through the other gate and they worked for a salary. The last game between gentlemen and players, the gentlemen were captained by Lord Ted Dexter. The players were captained by Fred Truman, son of a miner. When they got rid of gentlemen versus players, that was announcing that Britain had left that kind of class divide to some extent behind it. And I think what Cindy's report is doing is something equally profound, saying Britain needs to leave behind the hidden class divisions, plus the divisions, particularly between men and women in sport.
All fascinating stuff. Paula, is Britain a racist country?
there are parts of Britain that remain of the view that people who look like me shouldn't be here. There are parts of Britain who are prepared to challenge that view. And that is why we can have the Macpherson report. That is why we have the reports that we do today that have come out about cricket. That is why we can challenge the Metropolitan Police, the London Fire Brigade, etc., etc. So we have, unfortunately, lots of individuals who can give you their experience. We, unfortunately, have institutions that have been identified as still.
Well, the Met Police was a glaring example, and it's hard to think of a more damaging thing than to have your main police force in the country condemned as institutionally racist. I mean, Richard, this is part of the problem. There are certainly still institutions where you can just feel that the setup is geared towards being accused of, in many cases quite rightly, institutional racism. Of a degree.
And you highlight the Met Police, and we all know some absolute horror stories within that institution. You touched on the Fire Brigade. These are public sector institutions. I think there's far more progress. And overall, I don't think we are a racist country. I think we should celebrate the incredible progress we've made. But there are pockets of it. What troubles me most is those pockets are in the public sector. Just coming back to the cricket, Piers, there are things actually, again, that I don't think the report does justice to. My son plays in an Oxford league. Okay, there are many teams there where there are either 100% Asian ethnicity within the team or the vast majority of it. Again, I don't think that is celebrated enough and appreciated enough. So we're making great progress. There's always more to do. But for heaven's sake, let's look at the positives, not just beat ourselves up.
What did you feel about St Paul's Cathedral having this thing on their website for what turned out to be a long time, labelling Winston Churchill a white supremacist?
I just think it's appalling. I mean, he's one of the greatest heroes. He saved this country from the ultimate, most hideous white supremacist,
yes.
Adolf Hitler, for heaven's sake. And we should be celebrating and thanking that. And for sure he made mistakes. We all do. But we are so much better than we were.
Racist mistakes, Richard?
I wasn't around at the time.
Yes,
I didn't know the context
you know
at the
what the
time.
history books tell us. Were those mistakes racist mistakes?
In today's world, we would say definitely. In the context of then, who knows what it was? We weren't around.
And so
but
it's important, isn't it, for us to address that?
Well, A.M. Wilson wrote I thought A.M. Wilson wrote a great piece today for the Mail when he said that you have to take all these people like Churchill, Gandhi, Mandela, in the totality of what they achieved. What is Churchill's greatest achievement? It was defeating Hitler, the ultimate white supremacist. So, I mean, Trevor, it's complicated, but obviously some of the things that Churchill said over the years were racially tinged, there's no question of that, which was of its time. I mean, those kind of comments were not unusual, but I don't think it was a white supremacist.
Well, I think these phrases are hurled around as phrases of abuse. Let's be clear. I mean, Churchill, for example, you mentioned Gandhi. Churchill, I think, described Gandhi as half-naked Indian fakir, a kind of pejorative, dismissive term. But that was the nature of the English aristocracy at the time.
Yeah.
And that was, without question, a racist point of view. But the important point is that it was normal. And that's...
Actually, I feel really uncomfortable, Paula, when we try and transport the morality of the day back to previous generations. And this brings me to...
Well, all I was going to say, Piers, is actually what it should tell us is it was like that then. Goodness me.
Now it's unacceptable.
Now it's unacceptable.
Exactly.
And we should really be thinking constantly, how have we moved this far?
Right, but on that point, though, Paula, this issue of reparations, for example, you know, people today paying for the sins of their ancestors who may have owned slaves. There was an extraordinary Reuters report today, hilarious in some ways. Do you know who the only they charted every American president's links to slave ownership. Do you know the only one who had no direct links to slave ownership? Donald Trump. The only one. Even Barack Obama, through his white side of the family, they could chart it back to slave ownership. Trump is the only one, apparently. It came after slavery, his line.
And we've discussed reparations before, and you know my view. I'm very uncomfortable about the fact that the British government felt it appropriate that they should pay back the slave owners and only finished compensating them in 2015. And yet, when we talk about reparations to those still affected by colonialism, we are told to shut down that conversation. And that comes back to what we're discussing about Winston Churchill. If people understood that Winston Churchill did say things that were inappropriate, that Winston Churchill did say things or held views that were racist, it's fine to encapsulate them at a point of history. I've got no problem with that. But what we don't do is say, no, we're not discussing this, and no, we're not hearing this anymore.
You don't take a place like St Paul's Cathedral, which literally was an emblem of the Blitz, for goodness sake, right, where Churchill stood up and basically single-handedly motivated this country to defeat a bunch of white supremacists from taking us over. Trevor...
Can I just say on that point, I do apologise for interrupting. There are a lot of people in this country who think that black people arrived on the Windrush. That was us stepping into this world. That's not true. We were here long before that.
Yes, I realise that.
You realise that, but a lot of people don't.
No, you may be right.
And it's the same in regards to the history of
let me ask Trevor an interesting question. In an interview with the Mail that you gave, you made the point that you were very disappointed that Meghan and Harry had this amazing opportunity as the first biracial couple in our monarchy to really be a force for change and good, and they blew it.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not going to let you get away with the whole Trump thing. Still not voting for him, right?
No. By the way, I've never told anyone to vote for Donald Trump, right? I'm not American. I wouldn't impinge on their thing. It just was quite funny. I read this report, and he was the only one.
I've got a lot of American, 4 sisters who live in New York, and they've got a view about Trump. But anyway, on the Meghan Markle thing, look, I think people mistake who Meghan Markle is. She herself said that until she became this princess, she never regarded herself particularly as black, and that's understandable. She grew up in Los Angeles, in the most wealthy black enclave anywhere in the United States, Parkview, Windsor Hills in Los Angeles. She went to a private Roman Catholic school, and in a sense, race was never really part of her background. And actually, you knew, anybody who comes from a black family knew that this was not her territory. When she made this supposedly incendiary claim about somebody asking about what Archie's skin colour will be. Well, actually, every black family...
Of course!
The minute that you know there's somebody coming, that's what you're speculating about. For white people, it's what colour hair, what colour eyes.
Particularly in a family, if one parent is white and one parent is black, as in her parents, for example.
But the point I really want to make about Meghan Markle is that she had to learn to be black on the job, as it were. And I think she made a bit of a mess of it. She didn't take advice. And that's, in some sense, is why I think they've squandered the opportunity to demonstrate something important about this country. Very quickly, we have the largest uniquely mixed-race population anywhere in the developed world that has come about through romance rather than coercion. And they could have been standard bearers.
I totally agree. Paula, you're grimacing.
I'm grimacing because obviously I love Sir Trevor, but we're going to disagree on that point. You yourself have just said she did a bad job of learning how to be black. Why did this person, have to learn how to be black? She had to learn how to be black because she had to confront racists. And it was the first time that she was having to confront racists. And we know that she was having to confront racists.
My point was that she didn't know anything about the issue.
And by the way, I don't believe she did confront racists.
And we know that she had to confront racists because Neil Basu, the ex-charity chief police, has told us that people have been arrested.
Richard, final words.
There's no evidence for a racist in the royal family. She blew a great opportunity to advance the cause of tolerance within this country and to show us as leaders. No, we didn't.
We let her down and we didn't.
We gave her a massive opportunity and she completely blew it.
There are people in prison now because of the threats they made to her life. And Piers, I know you are sensitive to people who have made threats to people's lives. You will understand that mental strain that was on her in terms of that. And you know that because you will have read the report from Neil Basu.
Confront. Tell me the name of one person that she confronted. She didn't even hear this remark about Archie. It was reported to her by her husband.
I'm referencing the ex-chief of police, Neil Basu, who was interviewed, and he informed the viewer that she had received a number of threats to her
but
life.
loads of us do have that. You have that, I imagine.
I have had a few.
Sorry.
From the far right.
Paula, you've already said,
and they
Paula.
have been arrested for that and charged and found guilty and are serving
But who
sentences.
did she
So in
have to
terms of
confront?
that, she
have to
confronted
confront?
racism.
No, she didn't.
She confronted racism.
She confronted threats, which we all get in public life.
To do with the
I've got to leave it there.
scheme.
Listen, we'll come back. It's an important subject. Thank you for all your perspectives. I appreciate it. Trevor, great to see you again, and good luck with the book. Windrush, 75 Years of Modern Britain, a cracking read. Welcome back. My next guest is Magic. He's one half of the legendary duo Penn and Teller, a global TV superstar. They offer a new crime novel, Random, and Penn, Jillette. Great to see you.
Good to see
Interviewed
you.
you many times, never in this studio, so great to have
nice.
you.
Really nice.
First of all, I want to talk about Teller, your great friend, co-star, has just had
47 years.
Big heart surgery
Yeah,
after a heart attack.
he had a quadruple bypass, and I got to tell you, it shook me up more than it did him. 2 days later, he was in physical therapy.
Where were you when it happened?
He was at home in Las Vegas, and it's really remarkable. As I was walking out of he's in a rehab facility where they're doing physical therapy. All the nurses took me aside and said, "We've never seen anybody like him. He's like a week ahead of where he should be, 2 weeks ahead." And I said, "Well, he's tough."
Yeah, but he's going to be okay.
Oh yeah, we'll be back end of November,
Amazing.
December, and
It's scary for you as his friend.
Terrifying.
Did you think for a moment you may lose it?
Well, there was no reason to think that, but I thought that. You know what I mean?
Of course.
All your fears go through your head.
Yeah. Well, please send him my very best.
I certainly will.
And on behalf of all of the viewers too. It's great, so much to talk to you about. But first of all, this issue of Kanye West, what he tweeted, being no platform, this whole issue of social media censorship. What's your view about it?
It all comes down, as usual, to me being wrong. When I remember being in a seminar at MIT at the end of the 80s, early 90s, talking about how when you'd had total free speech and everybody had access and looking at this as kind of a utopia, it had never crossed my mind that we'd find a way to monetize shock and hate and outrage. And once you've got those, and there are algorithms that are in place to monetize that, I don't think, of course, he should not have said that.
Should he be no platform for it?
These are private organizations. They can take them off, and they probably
But should he morally, do you think? Is it the right call? Where do you think that line with free speech and hate speech begins and ends?
I think that if you're talking morally, it's absolutely reprehensible and should never be said. Who decides that it shouldn't be said is a hard issue. But the real problem seems to be much deeper in that we found a way to reward that kind of thing. And of course, with our mutual acquaintance, Donald Trump, we saw that got rewarded and rewarded and rewarded. I don't care what they say about me as long as they talk about me.
Right.
That was always kind of nonsense, but now it seems very close to being literally true.
Should social media firms like Twitter, like Facebook, like Instagram, this awful case of this young girl who was bombarded with imagery about suicide and depression because she was looking for stuff about suicide and depression. And in the end, the court ruled that it ended up contributing to her taking her life. It seems to me it's a bit of a Wild West still. When you run a newspaper, it's regulated. You run a TV show, they're regulated. But the social media is just completely lawless, it seems to me.
The whole thing is there's got to be a way to change it so that that's not rewarded. And I don't think it's really tough to say we want to have a board or a government doing this, but private companies, Twitter can have anybody off there they want.
Of course, they can do what they want.
You can allow anybody you want on your show.
Yeah.
You can decide. You're deciding all the time who's not on your show.
In a way, it's a form of censorship by who you decide to have and not.
Yeah, you've decided that 7.6 billion people won't be on your show.
What's going to happen with your country in the next election? Is Donald Trump going to run again? Should he run again? Would it be good or bad for America if he
We've
does?
actually had one candidate run for president while in jail. It was the communist candidate in right after the First World War.
Really?
You can legally run in the United States.
Should Trump run again? Would it be good or bad for America?
For America, terrible. awful. I mean, we worked with him, you and I think that one of
Celebrity
the
Apprentice, yeah.
many things we agree on, some we disagree on, but many things we agree on is he was wonderful as a television character. But did either one of us think he'd be a good president?
I never thought he'd be president a million years.
No, neither did I. And
in a way, you know, his instincts were pretty good. The rhetoric was a lot of the problem with Trump.
Well, what I think was the problem was the complete and utter lack of shame.
Yes.
And
I don't think he has a shame valve.
No.
I mean,
No,
I don't think he has an empathy valve or a shame valve.
No,
But
and
he certainly got a lot of support from people.
Never heard him sincerely laugh at a joke that wasn't at someone's expense.
Yeah.
And more importantly, kind of poetically, never saw him tap his foot to music. Did you ever see him like?
No, but now you mention it, that is creepy. I totally agree.
It's really creepy.
Talking of people tapping their feet to music, you're about to replace Simon Cowell on Britain's
I'll get a
Got Talent for
higher
Christmas
waist and
special.
I'll undo my
I
shirt.
mean, you're far too good looking to replace Simon Cowell, aren't you? But it's a one-off special at Christmas on Britain's Got Talent. Sitting, in fact, probably in one of the old chairs I used to sit on as a judge.
Yes. And it'll be a 2-hour Christmas special, all magicians, and I think I know all of them. So it'll be wonderful because they really shoot magic very well.
Yeah.
And I've seen the list of who they have on, and they are wonderful.
Brilliant. Well, it's strange, isn't it, how our worlds collide. I've interviewed you around the world. You're now going to be judging the show I judged for 4 years, and it's great to see you.
And I will try to fill your shoes.
Good luck with Random, the book.
Oh, thank you so much.
I hear it's great. It's great to see you, and send all our very best to Teller.
I certainly will.
Good to see you.